Are you thinking of selling your home and you want to get your home ready and you want it to look as nice as possible? And in your head, you are already starting to panic about what will happen when the buyer has their home inspection and the home inspector comes into the house. And as sure as anything, you know it's coming. The home inspector is going to tear the place apart. Well, never fear. I'm here to tell you this is a common problem. And what I do right up front with all of my sellers is I say, listen, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, when the home inspector comes to your beautiful house, and then when he leaves and you see the report, you're going to feel just like you had a brand new baby and somebody came up to you and said, your baby's ugly. Now, when I say that, the sellers laugh and they kind of get what I mean. But later, after the home inspection, they're like, oh boy, you were right. It felt like somebody came up and said to us, our baby's ugly. So the most important thing to remember is to be aware up front that the home inspection is coming. There's not too much in advance you can do to avoid everything. And let me just walk you through the worst of it so that you can end this video on a happy note. My name is Christina Fruneaux. I work with eXp Realty of Southern California. I work with sellers and buyers at all price points, and I want you to know that it doesn't matter how expensive your home is or how inexpensive your home is. Every single home has stuff that the home inspector is going to find. Every single seller is worried about that. And every single transaction, almost without fail, has a solution. And we always can close the transaction. There are solutions for everything. So the worst case scenario, well, one of the worst case scenarios I can tell you about was a home I sold in an earthquake zone. We knew we were going to have problems because when we walked in the house, the floors were kind of higgledy-piggledy. And in the back of the house, there were cracks in the walls. And in one of the walls, the fissure was like maybe this wide. So you know there's going to be something bad. When the home inspector came, sure enough, he crawled out all those things we noticed. And then he crawled under the house and he looked at the foundation. And what he saw was a disaster. It actually looked like the house should have fallen down a long time ago based on what the home inspector found. So the buyer at this point was super nervous. It was a single woman and she didn't want to deal with all this mess by herself. She wasn't sure how to go forward. And my sellers at this point were like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? We're going to have to deal with this with every single buyer coming along. This is a hot mess. And I said, you know what? Stop and freeze. Everybody chill. Let's just get this figured out. And I called in a structural specialist and they came in, they did an inspection of the foundation. And it was their job to provide solutions as well. I mean, they do structural work. So they gave an estimate, and the seller was really surprised to see that the estimate was nowhere near as expensive as what he was expecting, which there's a moral there too, by the way. Almost always, problems on home inspections look like they're big disasters, and they're usually pretty fixable. So once we looked at the inspection and the cost for repair, we went back to the buyer and we said, hey, Miss Buyer, we'll go ahead and we'll give you a credit for half of this. We don't want to do the work before closing escrow. It's going to take a while. So here's some money. You can get who you want to do it. You can get your own contractors. We'll pay for half of it. What do you think? And the buyer was so happy to have a solution that worked for her. And she loved the house so much. And she was so happy that she didn't have to give up on a house that she loved, that she said, sure, that sounds great. So you can see at the end, something that could have been a big disaster turned out really, really well for all parties. And again, I can't tell you how often I see things that somebody might think is a disaster, and I know that there's a solution for it. So before you freak out any further, give me a call, send me a text, 714-592-8299. I'm Christina Fruneaux. Feel free to share this message to someone else you might know who needs this information, and looking forward to talking to you. That wasn't so bad, right?